October marks International Cyber Awareness Month, and for good reason too. The Mimecast 2023 State of Email Security Report showed that South Africa ranked 6th on the list of countries most affected by cybercrime, while Interpol's African Cyber Threat Assessment Report of 2022 revealed that a total of 230 million cyber threats were detected in South Africa, with 95% of those taking place through email. Well, to tell us how we can better mitigate against cyber criminals and more, I'm joined by Gareth Cremen. He's a cyber security legal specialist. Thank you very much for joining us, Gareth. So being a high-tech African country that South Africa is, it seems as though the country does get quite hard hit with these cyber attacks. Typically, what are devices or systems being hacked for? What information are these criminal elements trying to get hold of?
Good afternoon. So let's start quickly by talking about the top 5 sectors and the top 5 cyber risks firstly, directly there. So the first instance you have is ransomware. And typically that's a form of malware that attempts to encrypt or scramble data, typically of companies and organizations. And then the criminals or cyber criminals would then use the encryption of the data as a means in that to extort money from the company in order to release it, or unscramble the data, so it's usually as an extortion method. In the case of ransomware, typically over there, it comes down to staff awareness, staff training. Human error will always slip in. And education is not a once-off tick box exercise. It's continuous training of employees inside of organizations of what to look out for, in particular unsolicited emails, links in unsolicited emails, and emails that look legitimate. There is various malware protection that parties can install, so you can install and maintain very good antivirus or malware protection software inside of organizations. Software updates are very much important to keep your applications up to date. And then you must look at data backups. And data backups are an integral part. Assuming you are the subject of ransomware, and we've seen it in South Africa with a number of multinationals that are present here, where their systems have been shut down and organizations cannot trade for weeks on end, what is the ripple effect of that to your company? At what point in time do you become financially distressed because of inability to trade and to carry the cost of employees, etc., and ongoing operating costs inside the company? Whereas if you have ongoing backups inside the company, how often do companies check their backup data and frequently go back and see, if I'm held to the subject of ransomware, I can plug in my hard drive backup and I'm up and running within a few minutes. That ransomware they can keep, you're not interested about it at all. So that's the first one. The second one we look at in terms of a cyber risk is what is known as phishing. And phishing is where parties attempt to gain sensitive information while posing as a trustworthy contact. For example, you will receive an SMS seemingly from your bank. And typically what will happen then, it will be followed up by a phone call with someone purporting to be your banker. And they'll say to you that your account is being hacked, whichever the case may be, and there's unscrupulous transactions, and there's an OTP sent to your phone. Please, can you hand it over? And they already have some information from you. And typically those are targeted attempts. And before you know it, you've given away your banking information, they've logged into your bank account, and they've cleaned the accounts out. It's a common occurrence. Other attempts at phishing that we've seen in South Africa is where parties try to replicate or to mimic being a CEO or a CFO of a company, and WhatsApp messages start coming through saying, please, can you transfer 50,000 Rand? I urgently need it. And they hold themselves out to being someone else. But obviously, there are no people within the organization and who to target. So an important aspect is companies must put protection and measures in place to protect the identity and the information of the CEO, CFO, or other relevant stakeholders inside the business. Employee training is important in terms of protocols for procedures to be followed if payments are to be made, if emails are unexpected or unsolicited or appear to be suspicious, report it to your IT team. Again, make use of your malware software, anti-malware software, and put your spam filters on inside of the organizations. The third cyber risk we've always looked at, and it's always been the one that was the forefront of mind, and that is typically hacking. We've always thought of hacking as being a very sophisticated matter where someone sits behind a computer and they constantly try to break into your firewalls, obtain all of your dial-in or your login credentials and details. And it is still a common occurrence. And typically, the criminals today are quite sophisticated in that they still utilize mechanisms of phishing, spoofing links, etc., that employees click on. And it's an important one because the question you need to ask is, what is the value of the data that they collect? and what is it worth? We've seen internationally social media companies, they're built on on personal data, and personal data is hugely valuable in the right hands and to many people as well as to cyber criminals. So from a hacking perspective, you need to look at the primary methods in order to protect yourself. What are the firewalls that you have in place for your networks? What is the data access security that you currently have in place? What are the procedures for removing access of an employee when they leave your organization? And when we talk about a hacking perspective, we've seen instances, and take, for example, your local coffee shop. You can go to your local coffee shop and you'll see a business person sitting there and having coffee. At some point in time, they'll get up, they'll leave their cell phone on the table and their laptop and quickly go to the water closet or whichever the case may be. And their laptop is unattended. Or they're dialing into Wi-Fi that's not their own local Wi-Fi through their own dongle. They're utilizing public Wi-Fi. These are all means in that which create further threats in terms of possible data leaks altogether.
Yeah, Gareth, I wanted to just come in there. Of course, you're listing all the various ways that we can be invaded, so to speak. But what I wanted to ask you is, what can people do? What can individuals and businesses do to guard against that? You've talked a lot about ensuring that your systems are in place. That suggests to me, you know, having skilled people. But if you're talking about SMEs or medium enterprises, sometimes the cost factor may be an issue. So what can you basically do to ensure that you can guard against it?
So if we take it a step back, you identify the risks from a cyber risk perspective. And if you say these are the risks that we're exposed to, your safeguarding mechanism becomes easier, because you're going to say, from a potential hacking perspective, I know I need to get network firewalls in place. These need not be very costly processes and that internally. Procedures should be written even for small, medium enterprises over there, and ongoing education and team training for your employees in terms of what to look out for. Human error is a common occurrence. It happens frequently. An important aspect, even for small, medium enterprises, is to employ the services of a penetration tester. There's a number of good penetration testers. It's not a very expensive exercise, but employ them at some point in time to identify and to see if they can penetrate the firewalls on your system. It's really worth gold at the end of the day versus potential downtime over there. In terms of even information in terms of how you keep it, data backups are important. How frequently do you back up your data and your servers, and that's even if you're a small, medium enterprise? There are a number of solutions available publicly, and there are good software systems for companies that are also relatively inexpensive. And it is a worthwhile one for corporations, and that to safeguard themselves, identify the risks, and to put the relevant means and mechanisms in place.
Yeah. So, Gareth, when it comes to insurance, what are you insuring for? Are you insuring for the impact of the infiltration? Because obviously, once somebody has hacked you and taken your information, that's gone. I mean, you can't get that back, and it can then be used for, misdeeds. So, what exactly would you be insuring for?
Look, you would have to take out cyber insurance. It's a necessity, I think, in today's day and age. And given the risks that South Africa faces in terms of the global spectrum and the ever-increasing, cyber attacks in South Africa, I would tell you to take out cyber insurance to cover you for all aspects of cyber risks generally, and take out the relevant policies with the appropriate insurer. Now, absent all of this, where does it leave you in terms of vulnerability and exposure? Because if you don't have cyber insurance, where are you left to, and where are your means to recover what has been lost or what has gone out into the domain generally? There's operating losses that you are going to suffer during that period in time. So insurance is becoming a necessity, and a lot of consumers and corporates, SMMEs, it's something they should be looking at, and it should be the forefront of mind, especially when trading in the marketplace.